co-host and running mate, Chris Minardi. Good afternoon, Chris.
Hey Jerry, how you doing today? Good afternoon.
Good. All good. And our special guest today is Judi Desiderio. She owns Town and Country Real Estate, and I'm going to turn it right over to her. And today we're going to be talking about the rental law, but I want to let her introduce herself. Hi, Judi.
Hi, Jerry. How are you?
Good. All good. Thanks. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. So I am Judi Desiderio, a partner at Town and Country Real Estate. We have 8 offices throughout the South Fork and the North Fork and service Shelter Island, the entire East End. So we are dealing with the new rental law from 165 people.
Wow. And how long have you owned Town and Country? A long time, right?
I think we've entered our 16th year, but I've been in the business for over 30 years. I was a partner at Cook Pony Farm earlier. So
you've been around a long time. You've seen it all, I'm sure, with this.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've driven over on the North Shore, and I see you have offices over there too. So you can really contrast both forks, which is kind of interesting.
That's right. And on the North Fork and parts of West Hampton Beach, where we also have an office, they are more MLS driven, where on the South Fork, it really is more an open market. So there are nuances to each fork and how business is done. But the rental law is something that concerns both forks, and it doesn't matter which platform you're working from. The rental law has to do with leases.
Got it. So before we get into the rental law, I just wanted to ask you with the virus and taking such a strong hold and all the people out of work and people fleeing Manhattan, what are you seeing out there as far as rental market?
Well, there was a big explosion of people when this first happened in the city and companies were shutting offices down and telling people to work from home. There was a mass exodus out of the city. As you can see now, when you look at the live streams of the Park Avenue, Fifth Avenue, any of the streets in the city, they're vacant. And those people have come out to the East End. They've gone upstate. They've gone down to Florida. They've gone everywhere except staying in Manhattan, which is now probably, I don't know, a fraction of what the normal population is.
Exactly. So how do you see it affecting our summer?
Well, we're at August capacity right now, I would say.
Wow.
I mean, you guys are out here now, so you understand, and we see the roadways, we see the people. As you know, I live up on the water on Kings Point, and I take my bike over to the end of Girard Drive. And I've never, even in August, seen as many people jogging, bicycling, skateboarding on Girard Drive.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is amazing. Like I drive around the village, and I think it's even at nighttime you see there's like cars and lights on in houses that you very rarely see occupied. It's a very interesting dynamic that's going on. I mean, I understand it. I mean, I understand wanting to get out of the city. My daughter, who also lives in the city, fled to New Jersey. So, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
So
you wouldn't want to stay in an apartment if that's really, if we're in lockdown mode. So if you stay in an apartment and they've closed all the parks, where do you get some mental salvation and some exercise? You can't go to a gym. You can't go to a spa. You're so limited with your resources in the city that it makes sense that people would leave. Wall Street Journal yesterday, Josh wrote an article about how the Hamptons is the safest place to be right now. I kind of wish he hadn't written that, but I think the secret's out anyway.
That's true, even though Suffolk seems to be going back up again with their hospitalizations, but I guess that's for a different show. So I guess if you could just fill us in, I know there's been a lot of law changes, not only in criminal law and all the other things that go in, and I know the DA's office, that's kind of my field, and I've seen all the changes they've made, and some of like the bail reform, which is being tweaked, but what are you seeing in the real estate? I heard I heard you did a great presentation at Rowdy Hall, so I was very anxious to have you on to explain it to everyone. If you could go right into it.
Sure. And thank you for the opportunity. It was before the coronavirus that a new rental law came down, which really was not written for seasonal leases, very obviously, and it wasn't written for short term, which is what primarily we have out here. So it was written for year round. I want to say more HUD and affordable housing. That was what it was written for. And being in the business over 30 years, I've seen the evolution of how we do our business. And what I mean by that is, the mode of operandum before this new law was that if you were renting a house in the Hamptons, you paid the full summer up front. And this way, the landlord was secure in knowing that they had the money and they had the tenant and everything was secure. And the tenant was secure that they couldn't be discarded for a higher amount or whatever it might be. So now the new law says that a landlord cannot collect any more than 1 month upfront and then can't collect the second month until the second month begins. They can only collect 1 month security, and they can no longer collect utility deposits. Now, all of the systems that were in place because of mistakes that had happened. And what I mean by that is this: the collecting the utility deposit is something that is really good for both sides. And I'll tell you why. Because with a utility deposit, the landlord has the amount of money that they should need to cover the pool, the landscaping, the housekeeping, the all of the operating expenses on that rental. And what used to happen was many a times people would almost be abusive insofar as, oh, I saw leaves in the pool, so I don't want to pay the pool guy. Well, it's the landlord's pool guy. So if they don't want to pay the pool guy and your pool guy is not being paid, what are you going to do as a landlord? You're going to come out of pocket. So that's the same person who says, I'm not going to pay the cleaning person because I don't like the way that they cleaned. It's a small portion of the tenants that we had before, but it was enough to make the entire community of real estate come of one mind and say, we need to protect the landlord, and that's who we work for as brokers, and let's get a utility deposit up front. So that's how the utility deposit was born. As far as getting all the rental money up front, that was born from people saying, "Oh, you know what? I'm not going to stay for August. We now have a wedding somewhere, or the weather's not going to be so nice." So then all of a sudden, the landlord's left with they paid for July, and come August, they don't have to pay, and they go. Then what? Then your
Right.
landlord doesn't have the time to replace that August tenant. And you can try and go and chase someone for that August money, but it didn't happen. So that's how um, the whole system of getting the money up front came, and that's where the utility deposit was born, and that's how all of this functioned beautifully for many years. The landlord has to keep records, has to give records back to the tenant when they return the deposits, whether it's the security deposit for damage or the utility deposit for operating expenses. So that's how it was all done, and it was really great until now. And now this is going to be a problem for a lot of landlords.
Wow. Do you see? I'm sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
I had a question, Judy. Before Corona, did you see rentals slowing down because of these new rental laws? It would seem to me that, as what you just mentioned, landlords were hesitant to rent because it's technically just a pain and the money is not in their favor anymore. Maybe the rental business was going to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Now Corona hits and the rental market seems to exploded. Could you just discuss the before and the after effect of now? How are things happening now? Because it seems like the rental market's really busy right now and people just had to deal with these new laws.
Mm-hmm. Chris, you're 100% correct. What happened when the new rental law came down into effect, we had landlords say, okay, the house is not available Memorial Day through Labor Day. The house is available only July and only August separately, because this way they got their money up front. So now we were having landlords choose not to rent at all because it was too difficult, or break the season up and not avail for the whole season. There were so many different things that were happening, and then Corona hit. And then everything went by the wayside, and people were literally, if there was a tent available or an RV available, they would have rented it just to come out east. And one, I hate to call it a workaround, but if you can understand when you're renting a house for say $300,000 or $400,000, and it's for say May through September, and all they can collect is $60,000 or $70,000, that landlord's hugely at risk in a very big way. So many of the landlords, even with less expensive rentals, wanted security. So what they've done is they've hired attorneys as escrow agents. And there are some attorneys in town who will do this. And the escrow agent is the lawyer, and they draw up the lease. And what they do is they collect all the money from the tenant and then release it to the landlord in accordance with the new law. So the landlord's not breaking the law. The tenant is giving an escrow agent the money up front, and it's being released in accordance with how we're supposed to do it now. But that was then, and this is now, and everything is poof.
That's crazy. A bunch of years ago, the town instituted the rental law.
You mean the rental permit?
The rental permit, yeah. And there was a lot of controversy over that. It seemed to have died down. Is that helping, hurting? How is that affecting the real estate market?
Southampton has had a rental registry also for a number of years. And they learned that you have to make it simple and inexpensive in order for people to oblige. And so initially, Southampton, it was like an inch thick, and it was a lot of money, and they adjusted. East Hampton is, I think it's growing into, but now we have town hall is closed. So
Right.
if we have people who wanted to rent to somebody because of the coronavirus and they can't get a rental permit, how is that going to be enforced? So we're kind of all dealing in a new normal and uncharted waters. But in answer to your question, I don't think any professional has a problem with registering rentals. It's what's involved with the registration. In East Hampton, if you're asking somebody who's had a rental home for 20 years to now get an updated CO and have floor plans drawn for their house, and I understand why. I mean, my husband, my son, they're firemen. Chris, you know. So if there's an accident or something, you need to be able to know the floor plan. I get that. But if that expense becomes too much for the landlord, will the landlord then break the law and just rent it without it?
Right.
So that's an issue. And the second issue is you can't make brokers responsible for what a landlord has to do. The fact that the town came out and said, okay, you're not allowed to advertise a house in the town of East Hampton unless you show the rental registration number.
Right.
That's making us responsible for something we have no control over. That's
Right.
not appropriate either. So there's just so many things that I think really needed to be fully baked.
Yeah. So the rental registry, when it came out, the idea behind it was to give code enforcement a better ability to crack down on illegal rentals, house sharing, short-term rentals that violated the town code. And has that helped? I guess that's the question. Or is this just another tax?
You know what? That's a good question. And I tend to think it's more the latter than the first, because like with most other things, if you're an honest, honorable, reputable person, you're going to go and do everything in your power to get that rental registry number. If you're somebody who's going to abuse the system, you're going to abuse the system. If you're going to put more than one family in a single family residence, I'm going to venture to guess that person's not going to get a rental registry number.
Got it. And as you know, the village doesn't have a rental registry.
That's correct.
So do you see a difference between the two municipalities as far as, is one better than the other?
The question was, did East Hampton Town do this as a tax, as you say? Because
I think their intent was to help code enforcement, but my question was, has it really helped, or is it just a tax? I don't think they set it up as a tax. I don't think that was their intent. I think their real intent was to try to help code enforcement crack down on what the neighbors and the neighborhoods were complaining about. So,
I
but
agree.
what has it become just a tax, and it's not really effective?
Right.
That was my question.
If you don't have the personnel to monitor this,
Right.
to really enforce the laws, then what have we done other than just, you know, put forth a permit that requires a lot of money for some owners? And in answer to your question, between the village and the town, maybe because the village is so either you're close knit, you're north of the highway, you're on a smaller piece of property, or you're south of the highway, and I don't think they're going to have multiple families in those houses south of the highway.
Right.
So maybe it's less of an issue in the village than it is in the town. I
Right.
think there was more abuse in the town of what really, no more than four unrelated people and blah, blah, blah. I think that abuse happened more in the town than the village, which is what was the impetus behind the town making the move that they made.
Got it. Okay. And what about the short-term rentals? Do you see that increasing, or is that reducing? I mean, I kind of know the answer, but I figured I'd let you answer it.
Is this BC or AC?
No.
Before Corona or after?
Yeah, before Corona. Yes.
Before Corona, the rule was more the 1 month or 2 months, where years ago it was Memorial Day through Labor Day was
Right.
the rule. And then the 1 month only came afterward. But since Corona came, we have people who really need, quote, want, quote, a full season or longer. They're looking for, April through September, October, because they don't see themselves going back to the city too soon.
I see. Okay. So we're almost getting, because of the virus, we're almost getting back to our long-term rentals, which really is beneficial to the people who are renting their homes.
Totally. And it's beneficial to the town, Jerry, because when you have people renting a house for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, they're going to invite everybody, their uncle, their aunt, their cousins. Everybody's going to bring
Right.
their cars, their dogs, their friends. And before you know it, you're actually running like a hotel room where
Right.
people are just too much use. Our infrastructure wasn't built to accommodate the number of people that were coming out.
That's a great point. I mean, that's a great point that I never thought about, because if you're renting from Memorial Day to Labor Day, you can have your families and friends out over a long period of time.
Correct.
A couple here, a couple there. But when you're a short-term rental, you want to have everybody to the Hamptons as in that one weekend or 2 weekends that you have it. That's a great point, which then overwhelms everything that we have here. So
correct. It overwhelms the infrastructure. It's bad for the landlord. It's bad for the houses. Yep. But that's what happened. And that was a result of Airbnb and HomeAway and VRBO, because all of a sudden they were opening up Hampton homes for 2-week rentals.
Right.
And what are you going to do if you're, going to Florida for 2 weeks? You're going to invite everybody in the state of Florida that to come and visit you.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And then, moving, you said it becomes like a hotel. It's actually hurting our bed and breakfast, our inns. The inns are under enough, restraints as it is. And then to have these short-term rentals taking more business away from them, that's another thing. And then the short-term rentals are not paying the hotel taxes that the inns have to pay, and
right.
and all the other things that go into running a business.
Right.
So, yeah,
it really wasn't a healthy environment, BC. It was really getting bastardized, and
right.
That was sad to see. And yes, we were at Rowdy Hall talking about it, and I asked Mark Smith there, who owns Rowdy Hall, and I said, so Mark, are they coming out to dinner? Because I see them bringing trays of lasagna and hamburgers for the grill, and I don't really see them. And he said, no, you're absolutely right. So when people are here long term, this becomes their home too.
Right.
Their home away from home. They treat it more like their home away from home. They're respectful. They go out to dinner. If they have to go to a wedding one weekend, it's okay to leave the house empty.
Right.
They feel the need to maximize and industrialize every single thing that's going on.
So Chris and I get into office, and we want to crack down on Airbnb, or let's not just pick on Airbnb. Let's just call it short-term rentals. We want to crack down on it. There's already a very strict law that the village has. How do we find them? How do we enforce it?
You have a small army is what you need.
Right.
That's a problem. I think you have to engage the public, because there are tons of year-rounders who know when a house is being rented by the week or the 2 weeks. And I've been a firm believer. I'm out here for years. I'm in real estate. When we would get calls for, 1 week, 2 week rentals, unless it was for the horse show or something like that, I would tell our agents, we can't do that.
Right.
It's just not what we want. It's not what we want to be doing. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of responsibility. And now, one caveat to all of this is you can't evict somebody. So if you put somebody in your house short term and they're one of those unscrupulous people, what happens next?
Right.
And if you've rented your house the first 2 weeks of August and the second 2 weeks of August, and that first 2 weeks of August doesn't get out, what do you do then?
Right. You start a court proceeding, which is going to take 3 months. They'll move out by then.
Correct.
But you've lost everything.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And that's why we don't do it as agents go at town.
Yeah.
Registry.
That's why I always thought the rental registry should have been more of somehow brought the tenants into the mix, almost like a tenant registry, because I think most landlords, and you would know better than me, but I think most landlords, they don't want people who are going to take advantage of trash their homes or say they're renting as a nice couple and then bring 30 people into the house. I just don't see that. I'm sure there's some people out there that do that, but if the rental registry was incorporated the tenant and the tenant was on the hook, signed a bunch of affidavits, signed things under penalty of law, that if they did violate any of these rules, that they would be held responsible and not just the landlord. And that was always my criticism with the town rental registry. It didn't bring the tenant in, and it only holds, even if the landlord discovers the problem and reports it to code enforcement, they're on the hook, which I never thought, they could use it as a defense later in court that they brought it to the attention of code enforcement. But to me, it never made sense. I really think that the tenant needs to be brought in on the process to hold their feet to the fire.
I agree. If I remember correctly, Southampton in the beginning did have that you wrote down, you had to, the landlord had to say who the tenant was and all of their information.
And their cars, maybe.
When you have a permit to build a house, your electrician's on the hook, his information's there, your plumber's on the hook, his information's there. All of the people who are responsible for that home are on the hook. So it makes more sense to do it that way.
Right. Chris, you have anything? I'm just going to go over my notes.
Just, I guess, one quick question. It's a little off the subject, but Judy's an expert. So, Judy, you do a lot of village rentals, and as you know, village rentals are generally not cheap. And what do we do as a village with a 1 month multi-$1,000 rental and they don't get access to the beach? How do we fix that problem? Because right now, if you were to go south of the highway and rent a house for $100,000 or more, those people don't get a beach sticker. What's your suggestion on that? And have you run into that problem? Have your tenants that you've rent to call you and said, how do I go to the beach? I'm spending all this money.
Mm-hmm. Excellent question. Many a times, especially if it is one of the high-end rentals south of the highway, the owners usually leave a beach vehicle. They do. So there's your very expensive answer to the $100,000 or more for the 1 month rental. The rest of them that are in the village that are maybe not quite at that level, what do? You can buy a pass during the week, right, gentlemen? It's just the weekends that are the problems. Is that correct?
Well, it's really all the time, but Chris just joined our party yesterday, but this is one of my pet peeves with this entire beach permit thing, and Chris and I haven't discussed it yet, but I'm going to propose that if somebody owns a house in the village and they rent their property, that they can transfer it to the tenants. Mm-hmm. That's what I think we should do, Chris.
Well, Jerry, if you take your concept of vesting the tenant to secure them to the health and well-being of the property and its surroundings, then that is a nice golden ring for them.
Right. Because a lot of times the rentals don't even take place until after the beach permits are sold out. So you're not even giving a person an option. And I brought this to the village board many years ago when I was police chief, that we should have full season permits. We should have July permits, and we should have August permits, because you could recycle a lot of those permits.
Mhm.
So, some people may only, if they're just doing a July rental, we could resell those permits in August. And
Right.
then, you could just provide more, like I said, recycle the permits, and you could provide more permits.
I think that sounds conceptually like a very good idea. The problem, if I recall correctly, in the beginning was that on a holiday weekend, people who were year-rounders from the village couldn't get a parking space. Is that what happened? Like if it was 4th of July weekend or Labor Day weekend?
To my knowledge, they never tried a different month permit. Like, we could just color code them. I mean, I don't think it's that hard. If somebody knows they're only renting for July, and they come into Village Hall to buy a beach permit, you can simply ask, are you Memorial Day to Labor Day? Or are you just here for June? Or are you just here for July? And they could just get a July permit. Then we would, let's say 500 July permits go out. We know we could resell 500 permits for August. And you wouldn't increase the numbers. You would just be trading them.
Right. So your concept is the homeowner's not using the beach permit. So
No, I'm sorry, Judy. I'm talking about not non-resident permits. I'm talking about the non-resident permits. We could color code them and use August and September. The resident permits, if they're going to rent their home and they don't want to leave a vehicle for somebody, which opens up a whole nother liability issue, they could forfeit their permits to their tenants for resident permits. Sorry if I was unclear.
No, that's okay. I get it now.
Well,
Okay.
the sticker goes with the house. It doesn't go with the actual person occupying the house. It goes with the house. So if you're in
Very
the house,
simple.
you can park. And to your point, it'd be better to get more people able to enjoy our beaches as a whole. But on 4th of July weekend, we're always going to have a problem. I mean, that's not going to change. And if you go to the beach at 2:00 on a 90-degree day on a Saturday in July, you know what? We're always going to have those days. There's 1 or 2 of them every year. And, we do our best. But all the other days, it would be great to open them up to people that really would like to go to the beach and enjoy our village beaches. I mean, those days are few and far between.
Right. And you have that little car that goes back and forth from long-term parking. So
Right, the free ride.
Really wanted to take their take their family to the beach, you have that as an option for them.
Right. But, if you're renting a home for $100,000 on Lily Pond Lane, and you're not allowed to drive to the beach, seems kind of silly to me. But
I agree.
I don't think it's being very friendly to our residents. I mean, they own the house. I mean, we should try to accommodate people as much as we can. That's my feeling.
Right.
So,
and like I said, maybe that's the way to link the two concepts together, of having the tenant be registered somewhere, and therefore the permit be given to the tenant.
right. I mean, there's many ways we can do it. And I think what we need to do is hear from professionals like you as to what the problems are. And then if people who are experiencing problems, usually they have a solution. So that's what we need to talk to. We can't just sit in a closed room and make decisions on things we have no idea what we're talking about.
Exactly.
So, but hey, we're out of time.
There you go.
It's amazing how fast these go. It's amazing. But Judy, thanks so much. I know it was last minute we asked you to come on, but I really appreciate you. You're so knowledgeable, and it's been great. Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great night.